And today's latest news and rumors from around the NHL, we're looking at teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs and some trades they may make before training camp or ahead of the season. Plus, we have the latest on Patrick Laine, the Rangers and Kaapo Kakko. We supposedly learned the holdup on the Sidney Crosby extension. Plus, we have some other news around the league, including the Boston Bruins having a Jack Edwards replacement for their play-by-play commentary, and a former Oilers defenseman has announced his retirement. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about in today's video. Let's start with the news that we got that former Edmonton Oilers defenseman Oscar Klefbom has officially announced his retirement. Of course, he's still a young man, only 31 years of age, and he hasn't played in the NHL in some time. So I'm sure this news is probably going to be confusing for some, and some may think that he's already been retired, and for some purposes, I guess in a way he sort of has been, but he hasn't appeared in the NHL since 2020, and that was in August of 2020. Of course, that was the year that we had the COVID shutdown, and the NHL came back late summer, early fall for the bubble playoffs, and they had the qualifying round. The Oilers ended up losing in the qualifying round to the Chicago Blackhawks. That's the last time that Klefbom actually played in the NHL. Of course, he was dealing with a shoulder injury, and he ended up missing the next couple of years, of course, until the contract eventually expired. So there's been a lingering long-term shoulder problem that's kept him out of action and from appearing in the NHL really ever since. It's kind of a shame, really, because he was one of the better Edmonton Oilers defensemen. He was certainly a good offensive force from the back end, and they certainly missed him there for stretches as well. But Oscar Klefbom, even though he hasn't appeared in the NHL in many years, has finally officially announced his retirement. As I mentioned off the top as well, we got some Boston Bruins news, and that's really for the play-by-play. Of course, we know longtime Bruins commentator Jack Edwards has been going to be replaced. He was announced that he would be retiring due to health complications and would not be doing the play-by-play for the Bruins broadcast on NESN any further. So they've now replaced him with Judd Surratt. So he's the former radio play-by-play announcer, gets the opportunity to move into TV. So certainly a good opportunity for him. I know Jack Edwards himself commented on social media today that they made a great decision. Somebody he's quite happy to see get the opportunity. So he will get a spot there, which was obviously Edwards has held for an extended period of time. Regardless what you think of Edwards, I mean, he would occasionally have some controversial comments, but at the end of the day, he was pretty well respected and certainly had a long career. And like I said, had to retire due to health complications. So we certainly wish him the best and what comes next and whatever battles he's going through that way. Some other interesting news that I didn't expect to come across today, but former Detroit Red Wing defenseman Danny DeKeyser is actually suing a life insurance company over long-term disability payments. I mean, we know DeKeyser hasn't appeared in the NHL in a few years now, since his 6-year contract that he had with the Red Wings expired. That's been, 2 or 3 years ago that I think it was, I want to say this will be the 3rd season coming up since his last game there. He did attempt a comeback where he played in the Toronto Marlies system for a handful of games. Didn't really, go much further than that, and he called it a career at a reasonably young age. But certainly, after the first couple of years of his career, he started encountering a lot of injuries. The injuries certainly played a role in his declining play, there's no doubt. But, still had a long stretches being an important, defender for Detroit. He currently now works as a real estate agent. And like I said, he's looking for $680,000 of life insurance long-term disability payments. So obviously there must have been some issues. We know players do have insurance policies when they're playing in case anything happens to them. Clearly there's been some non-payments made or some disputes that he's looking for. So certainly, not the type of news you'd expect to see when you see a player in a lawsuit. You figure it can't be good news at all, but not the kind of lawsuit you often hear of. So certainly hope Danny DeKeyser's doing okay, and obviously wish him luck with his lawsuit there. We supposedly learned the reason today as well, and what is the holdup with the Sidney Crosby contract extension. A lot of Pittsburgh media speculated that on 8/7, so August 7th, which is, we know Crosby's very superstitious. He was born 87 his whole career. His last contract was it 12 years at $8.7 million. That maybe would be announced on his birthday. But that didn't happen. His birthday's come and gone, and Rob Rossi of The Athletic, who was one of those media members who originally suggested that maybe that could be the case, has new information suggesting that it actually is a case of them not having an agreed upon term. Looks like term is the holdup here. It doesn't seem like money is the issue. He's reporting that it seems like Crosby and his agent Pat Brisson, along with GM Kyle Dubas, are mostly aligned, and for the most part, there's no issues or holding things up for what he's going to be paid per season. But Crosby seems to be uncertain on how long he wants to sign for. Obviously, we know if you look at the contracts for Malkin and Letang, I was a little bit surprised on some of those terms, especially Letang, who, when he signed a new contract, I guess it would have been a couple seasons back now, that he signed a 6-year deal. That one was surprising. Of course, Malkin, I think, signed for 4 years. So, you know, Crosby's basically in a situation where he doesn't want to put the Penguins in a bad spot. So he wants to kind of, I guess, sounds like he needs more time to determine how long he feels he wants to play. He doesn't want to have a contract longer than what he feels he can live up to and fulfill. Doesn't want to leave the Penguins in a bad spot. And, well, obviously that's, you know, not surprising knowing the kind of person he is. Now, clearly, if he gets to the end of the contract and he can't play due to injuries, it's not really putting the team in a bad spot per se, because with the LTIR rules, it's not like it's really, you know, a total disadvantage to the team. So I don't know that he should really be too concerned about that. But you know, some people are probably going to wonder if this means that, you know, not so much how long he wants to play total in his career, but how long does he want to play in Pittsburgh. I mean, you got to think that to some degree that he's kind of going through everything, all the options in his head, and trying to figure out how long he wants to sign for, knowing that, you know, this team may not be competitive enough to really come close to winning the Stanley Cup again during the next, you know, a few years. You know, of course, I would not be shocked, though, to see Crosby play at least to the age of 40 or maybe even early on. I mean, we know that earlier in his career, he had some neck and head injuries, which prevented him from missing a lot, you know, playing a lot of games. We know that he missed a lot of time. You factor that in with obviously, you know, the lockout, the COVID missing time. You know, Crosby's ability to climb the all-time ranks has greatly been impacted. You could say the same for Alex Ovechkin as well. So, you know, but there's all those things that he missed earlier. But at the same time, more recently, he's been a lot more durable, playing 82-game campaigns and still playing at a very high level. Like, how long can he keep that up? Nobody really knows. Crosby can't even predict that himself, but as long as he's still feeling really good and, you know, getting on the ice and feeling it, then he's going to want to continue to play that as long as he can. I mean, he obviously loves the game, very passionate, and certainly, you know, one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet. So at the same time, it's hard to put a term on this. A lot of people suspect it maybe 3 years. It doesn't mean he can't sign another contract, right? I mean, he could do a shorter term, and maybe that's what they end up doing. Maybe he extends just for 1 or 2 years and then to kind of take it and see how it goes and see how he's feeling. And then maybe he signs another year or two, right? Like, you don't know. There's nothing saying they can't do that either. They don't necessarily have to do one more contract and be done for the rest of his career. So we'll see. Obviously, it's kind of sounds like a lot largely in Crosby's hands for kind of determining what kind of term that he would prefer to have and how long he thinks he wants to commit to the Penguins and how long he wants to commit to playing hockey in the NHL. So we'll see. Like, obviously, there's bound to be some speculation that's going to come from this, even though we don't really have any reason to really generate much. You know, some people are going to look at that and be like, well, you know, maybe he just doesn't know how long he wants to be there. Maybe he wants to go chase a cup somewhere else. And we don't have anything concrete to say that that's the case. But over time, could it change? You never know. But I think it's most important to him, based on everything we've heard, to be a lifelong Penguin and have his legacy be that as a career Penguin and have as many records there as possible. So we'll see what happens with Crosby. Hard to say what the timeline will be, though, when we get a further update or when he might actually sign a contract. Now, one player to keep an eye on as well is New York, which we've talked about periodically throughout the offseason, is former number 2 overall pick, Kaapo Kakko. Certainly a new article from Arthur Staple in The Athletic makes it clear that general manager Chris Drury is very much open to trading the youngster. They signed him to a 1-year deal comparable to his qualifying offer, and a lot of people speculated at that time just because he's signed it doesn't mean he's not going to get moved. In fact, you could argue that a lot of players are more valuable with a contract than without, because there's no guesswork on what the team that's acquiring him is going to end up paying him or have to allocate for salary cap purposes, right? So in the case of Kakko, Arthur Staples says the main reason why he hasn't been moved is that there really just isn't much interest out there. The other teams are just not a player that other teams are coveting right now. And, you know, it's a case that would make him a really buy low type of candidate. And Chris Drury is trying to be careful with that, not wanting to give him away. So they really haven't liked any of the offers that have been presented. There is some belief that, you know, they have had some trade conversations around the player. Some teams have made maybe some informal offers, but really nothing that's going to pique the interest of the Rangers GM. So unfortunately for Kakko, like I said, at one point he was a big deal, number 2 overall pick. You know, you can only start slow and have so many down seasons early in your career before your stock starts to really drop and teams start to lose interest, because every year there's another, you know, couple of big deals coming into the league that's going to kind of grab the headlines and be the next group of players that they're going to be more interested in looking at. So in the case of Kakko, wouldn't rule out a trade, but, you know, what I would probably look for is if for some reason they can get maybe a good start out of him, or maybe a little bit more of a good preseason, maybe that'll boost the value enough to get some other team to kind of pay attention and maybe make a move. But it seems like the team wants to. There's just not the offers and the interest out there right now, which is why we haven't seen much. And that's unlikely going to change until the season starts, and hopefully he can change things with how teams view him. When it comes to Patrick Laine, a few reporters out there are kind of pouring cold water on the idea of a trade to those particular teams that they cover. Winnipeg Sun reporter Scott Billick has made comments recently on a return to Winnipeg for Laine, saying he just doesn't really see the fit, doesn't really see how it's likely going to happen. Says that there would be a lot of risk in Winnipeg to reacquire the player, given how the last few years have gone for him, and it would be a very challenging salary cap perspective for the Jets, even with the Columbus Blue Jackets retaining 50%. And we know Don Waddell and the Jackets don't really seem like they really want to do that. It doesn't mean they won't end up doing it, but you know, it's certainly far from his first preference to. And if they can make a move and retain maybe 25 or 30%, that would probably be more likely that what we see happen. Of course, you know, it's a kind of a, you know, a little bit of nostalgia. Think about Laine returning to Winnipeg. It's a shame, to be honest, where he was drafted the number 2 overall behind Austin Matthews. Had some really good early seasons. I do think it was fair to say, based on everything that we heard, that, you know, I'm not sure that he was really being treated the best by some of his teammates. There was a lot of speculation about some of the veteran players. They're just not really, I don't know, just kind of making things more difficult for him. There were a lot of rumors, especially not getting along with Captain Blake Wheeler. I don't know what's true and what's not. I do know that some of the veterans were definitely on him for his work ethic. There was that too. It goes both ways. I'm not saying one side's completely guilty and one side's not, but you know, at the same time, there's been a complete change there now. So, you know, I get the whole risk factor with him. It'd just be nice, in a way, to see him have a chance to return and have like a redemption tour, but we'll see. I know it does seem more challenging for Winnipeg to pull that off, especially where they have not traded Nikolai Ehlers, who's obviously one of Laine's good friends and somebody who's been in the rumor mill himself. But at the same time, we haven't heard a lot since the draft. That we knew that it was reported that Ehlers was very open to getting a trade and getting a fresh start, but that's not happened. So we'll see where things go in Winnipeg. And Montreal reporter of Sportsnet, Eric Engels, who covers the Habs, also kind of poured cold water on the idea of Laine to Montreal. Now, I know I've seen him talking to Tony Marinaro on his podcast, talking about the rumor that we had mentioned the other day about him, the trade that was rumored between him and Montreal. And he didn't doubt that some of the sources that were providing some of those details might have some intel, and, you know, that there might have been something to it. But he personally just doesn't really see it being a great fit, and is not really sure that the interest from the Montreal side is as high as some people are letting on. So again, Engels is very well connected. You know, obviously some of the names that we've heard a lot of the Laine stuff from, they've had some scoops in the past. I'm not saying that they don't have sources. I'm not saying that they don't know anything or anybody, but, you know, they don't have as much of a track record as somebody like Engels, who's worked for one of the big networks for an extended time and is certainly, you know, has probably fair to say more sources than some of the other people talking about it. So he says essentially that the interest on Montreal side is not as high as some are making out to be. So we will see. Obviously, Laine would likely go somewhere. As we know, we've heard about Minnesota and Buffalo being in the mix too. So I'll be curious to see what else we hear on the future of Patrick Laine. And a new article as well on from the Hockey Writers website from Jesse Lynch talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, wondering if they might trade Ryan Reaves. Going into training camp, obviously he kind of mentions that the forward group could have a lot of youth kind of battling for some of the final spots, referencing guys like Matthew Nyes and Bobby McMahon taking big steps last year. And then, you've got Nick Robertson, who's requested a trade himself. But, if he does end up signing a contract and going to Leafs camp, he's going to be battling for a spot. He's still got some prospects there as well. Besides them two, like you get Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton coming up. He references the fact that Ryan Reaves had some injuries in his first year. He was scratched a bunch of times, played some in the playoffs, but not every game and not a lot. Just wonders if the Leafs might be having some regrets or second thoughts on that 3-year contract that they signed with him as an unrestricted free agent last year. Again, Ryan Reaves has been signed and moved by a few clubs here in the last few years. A lot of them seem to like the allure and the idea of having the big tough guy on their team, and he's one of the most feared fighters in the NHL. But then, at the end of the day, he is older. He's got bad knees, bad ankles, doesn't skate well. The pace is certainly an issue. And, can he play a regular shift and not be a liability out there is the question. And I'm not sure, like the answer appears to be he can't do it too much. Like that's why a lot of games he only plays maybe about 4 minutes. And sometimes, you hope that he gets a fight in there or something that he can be effective. I mean, occasionally you'll see him, maybe have a few shifts, throw a big hit. But generally speaking, there was a lot of situations last year with the Leafs where he was a liability out there. So it's not going to make that contract easy to move, especially with multiple years remaining on it. So be curious to see what happens with Reaves. I don't know that he has any sources. I don't believe he didn't reference anybody in his article. But at the same time, this is more of an opinion based by the author and the writer here, suggesting that the Leafs might just have enough of a cap issue that he might become a casualty if they can help it, being outplayed in training camp. Because really, if like I said in the Leaf video I put out earlier today with the GM Report Card series, essentially the forward group is very much the same. There could be one or two little changes, and it's going to depend on if guys like Minton and Cowan can kind of work their way into roster spots. Do they have anybody else that can work their way into a spot? Is somebody in training camp like an Abruzzese or Steves or somebody going to come along and just be super impressive and kind of force their hand to give them minutes in the early part of the season? Like, we don't know that, right? So Reaves could have a tough time. Now, I wouldn't rule out the idea of Robertson getting moved too, because as I also mentioned in that video, I personally see it being a very difficult task for Robertson to find a roster spot too, because I don't think you want to play Nick Robertson on your fourth line. You ideally don't really want to play him on your third line either, but you'd probably be better off there than the fourth. And looking at how the lineup could work, if McMahon and Nyes both take top 6 spots, and you've got Max Domi as your 3C, then you have some other guys like Holmberg and Yarncroke, and you got David Kampf in there. Obviously, like I said, you got Fraser Minton, Easton Cowan. Like, I don't see a spot for Robertson. I struggled to find that spot. So I do wonder if it might be in his best interest, even though Brad Treliving has been on record to say that he feels that they could have a good spot for Robertson this year, and it's a big year for him, that he didn't seem to be too much in a hurry to honor his request for a trade. I honestly don't know that he's going to really be able to do much. Like, I honestly wonder if he's just kind of pumping his value there a little bit, because I don't see where he fits. I honestly think they'd be better off to move him and try to bring back, maybe if they can, like another younger defenseman or something. Maybe there's a bigger trade, because I know Timothy Liljegren's name is out there too. I don't know if maybe there's a bigger deal that can be found where both of those guys get packaged up for maybe a stronger defenseman or something. I mean, their decor is certainly improved from last year, I think, a bit, but, you know, at the end of the day, they got to get something back, either that or maybe they get a stronger prospect. I don't know what it is, but at the end of the day here, sometime, I think both those guys don't have long futures in the organization. So we'll see what happens. As far as Reaves go, wouldn't shock me, but I think it might prove difficult if they try to do that, given how he played last year and 2 years left on the contract. But I do think the author here is onto something, that it might be something they think about doing. Just might prove difficult. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.